The most important things to focus on when creating a character in SavageWorlds are your attributes and skills. Attributes in SavageWorlds are just like attributes in other role-playing games. Like D&D, they're a generic definition of your character's strengths. The real difference between SavageWorlds and other role-playing games is that instead of using one die type, SavageWorlds uses every basic die up to a d12. To start, a basic human has 5 points to spread around these attributes. Each point raises one attribute up one die type. Since each attribute starts at a d4, this means you could have each attribute at a d6, or 2 d8s and a d6, or a 10 and an 8. You get the idea. There's more information about each attribute in the rulebook, but basically, agility is your nimbleness, smarts is your mental agility, spirit is your willpower. It's important in combat. Strength is exactly that. Raw strength. The higher your strength, the more damage you do with melee weapons. And vigor is like constitution. It's your endurance and represents how much damage you can shrug off. Now on to the skills. Skills are interesting because they have linked attributes. All this really means is that if you want to raise a skill above the die type of its linked attribute, it costs more. For example, if you had 8 in agility and 6 in the skill shooting, it would cost 1 point to raise shooting to an 8. If you wanted to raise shooting again to a 10, it would cost 2 points, because you're exceeding the linked attribute. For skills, you get 15 points to spend. Each skill costs 1 point to buy, and it starts out on a d4. Counting up how many points you've spent can be a little tricky, so just ask your GM for some help. Once you've figured out your attributes and skills, the next things to decide on are your edges and hindrances. I recommend choosing your hindrances first. There's no requirement to choose hindrances, but I would recommend it. Right away you'll notice that each hindrance is labeled as either major or minor. You're allowed to choose 1 major and 2 minor hindrances. The major hindrance gains you 2 points, and each minor hindrance gains you 1 point. With 2 points you can raise an attribute by 1 die type, or you can choose an edge. With 1 point, you can gain a skill point, or you can get more starting money equal to that of what your GM allots you. So if your GM gives you 500 to spend, and you use a hindrance point to get more money, you now have another 500 to spend. Edges are like feats in D&D. They're non-scale abilities that help your character. There are a whole bunch of these, so just look around and you'll find something you like. Once you've got that all figured out, turn your attention to your character's charisma, pace, parry, and toughness. In SavageWorlds, your charisma is 0 unless you took the attractive edge or the ugly or the outsider hindrance. An average human's pace is 6 inches or 36 feet per round. This is affected if you have the elderly, lame, obese, or one-leg hindrance, and it's also affected if you have the fleet-footed edge. Then there's parry. The way parry is calculated is 2 plus half your fighting skill. If you don't have fighting, then your parry is 4. And finally, toughness. Toughness is 2 plus half your character's vigor, plus the armor worn on your torso. As for buying any armor and other items, that's found in Chapter 2 of the rulebook. That's it for the basics of setting up your character. If you need any further explanation, talk with your GM, and if you are a GM, read the rulebook and rewatch anything you didn't understand.